These are a full $250 cheaper than the Sundara Closed, and so I went in not really expecting them to hold a candle anywhere near the Sundaras. Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review. Today we're taking a look at the HiFiMan Sundara Closed headphone. These are a closed-back planar magnetic for $399 US. And as a fan of the original open-back Sundara, I was keen to hear how these were going to perform being a closed-back version. I know there's been some chatter from other reviewers and around the internet. I think some people aren't such a fan of these, and so that did have me curious as well, and I hope to share with you here in this review how I found them, where I think they're strong, not so strong, etc. As I said in the introduction, these are retailing for $399 US, and they bring together a bunch of HiFiMan technologies such as the stealth magnets, the nano thickness diaphragm. Obviously now we're moving into a closed back version, so that's a bit different. And so in addition to the things that we're used to seeing on a HiFiMan headphone, we've now got these, what I think at least, are beautiful beechwood cups. And on the inside of these are a pair of planar magnetic drivers with an impedance of 20 ohms and a sensitivity of 98 decibels per milliwatt. That translates to needing just 16 milliwatts to reach 110 decibels of sound, so you're going to be able to drive these from basically anything. While we're talking about the design, I've already mentioned the lovely cups, but beyond that, everything's pretty much the same as a Sundara. On the bottom of the cups, we've got our 3.5mm inputs. You've got dual-sided inputs there, so it can be run balanced. We've then got the standard kind of metal pressed yoke style here with a ratchet type headband adjustment, like so, and then a suspension band in the middle. And what that all translates to is a headphone that's generally very, very comfortable to wear. Mine had quite a tight clamping force when I got them, but not to the point that I'd say it was uncomfortable. However, I can imagine some people wanting to maybe put them over the box just to stretch them out for the first few days. The pads on these are what we're all used to seeing from HiFiMan for quite a while now, and that's that sort of hybrid approach with fabric against the skin and then some leather or fake leather around the outer and inner edges. You also get a basic but serviceable rubberized cable, and so everything that you can get in the box with the Sundaras is pretty much what you'd expect. HiFiMan now also ship in their boxes the piece that is in the box that stops the headphones banging together in freight is also now a headphone stand. So there's a little bonus there, but it's not the best looking headphone stand, so I'd rather go online and pick up something simple like the one that I've got here. And by the way, people sometimes ask about these headphone stands. They're linked in the description down below, but they're the Avantry bamboo stand. And so personally, I'd be picking up something like this or another one that you like, but it's also nice that HiFiMan do give you something in the interim if you don't already have a stand available. And so beyond what I've told you there's really not much to know about these other than how they sound, so let's launch into that. If you're trying to work out what piece of gear you should buy next, then the Passion for Sounds Recommends database might be helpful for you. In the description box of every single video, just down here, you'll find the Passion for Sounds Recommends section. If you click on this link, it'll take you through to the Passion for Sounds Recommends Airtable database. What you'll see in here is every single product that I've ever reviewed and recommend, in some cases products that I own but maybe haven't reviewed but recommend. And then once you're in here, you can use the filter button up here to decide to filter by things like whether or not the product type is for a headphone, for example. So maybe you're looking for a headphone. Filter it by that and you can now see every headphone I recommend. You can sort it by price, which is the default sorting, or any other sorting method that you want. And then once you've got the list of products you're looking for, you've got the links to the reviews of the products, and then also purchasing links for global retailers and also regional retailers for the US, Australia, Canada, and the UK. So feel free to play around with this, sort it, filter it however you want to. It won't affect what anybody else sees, and you can hopefully find just the right products for you. I hope this is helpful, and now let's get back to the review. I'm going to start by saying that I think the Sundara Closed are quite a good sounding headphone. They're not perfect, but having said that, most closed-backs have some kind of trade-off. It's a difficult thing to make a good sounding closed-back headphone because you've got all the reflections going on inside that need to be damped, that need to be controlled, And in the process of damping and controlling all of that energy that goes into the cups, often what ends up happening is we get trade-offs in the frequency response, or we get some slightly unnatural resonance. And indeed, in the case of the Sundara Closed, what I hear is a sound that has generally very good treble, a good sense of clarity overall, but a sound that is slightly what I'd call plasticky. It's very minor, I'm splitting hairs a little bit here, but there's just a slight unnaturality to the upper frequency sound. Transients from these are clean, but I wouldn't say they're exceptional. They're not kind of a snappy, fast, let's say energetic driver where it's kind of you're feeling the leading edges of notes. But at the same time, they're not sluggish or lacking in energy either. They just sit somewhere in the middle. They're kind of average. And I don't mean that as a knock. They're just not exceptional in terms of transients. Because of that slightly plasticky upper end that I mentioned before, I did find that with these female vocals, so lighter, higher pitched vocals, will generally sound a little bit unnatural. They've got that slight plasticky sheen to them, but it sort of disappears as you come lower in the range. So male vocals are great. Female vocals, depending on the register they're in, can just start to get a little unnatural. But again, I am splitting hairs here. This is something that I'm noticing as I listen to them critically. But for general music listening, I actually didn't notice it at all. So that's the degree to which it's there. It is there, but it's very, very minor. I find the bass weight from the Sundaras to be solid. It's there, it's full, but it's well controlled. And extension's also very good. And so overall, I think they're actually, for a closed-back headphone, a pretty well-balanced offering. They're not perfect by any stretch, as I've already said. They've got that slightly plasticky sheen in the upper registers. But for a $400 closed-back planar magnetic, I think they're pretty solid. Now, as always, I'll give you some comparisons shortly so you can really hear where they sit in the realm of some other headphones you might know. But before we get to that, let's talk a bit about their technical presentation. And that is to say that they give a good level of detail retrieval for the money. They're not going to be on par with much more expensive closed-backs or other headphones for that matter that are more expensive. But for where they're priced, I think their detail retrieval is solid. I also feel like their stage presentation is excellent, again for the price and for being closed back. And that's because they give a really nice sense of width, a good sense of separation between sounds. Admittedly, their depth of soundstage isn't great, and so you're not going to get a huge amount of layering in the soundstage, but for a closed back, I think they're doing a really good job. And the key thing for me there is that they don't ever feel congested. I don't feel like I can really understand the layers of an orchestra, for instance, when listening to the Sundara Closed, but I also don't feel like it sounds like all of the orchestra is sitting on top of one another. So you're getting a nice balance of as much space as you can probably create in an affordable closed-back headphone like this, and where the trade-offs do occur, they're not really impacting the enjoyment of the headphone. And so as I've already kind of alluded to, I think they're actually quite good for classical music. They're a headphone that does have a fairly robust bottom end to them, and so you're going to need to like your classical with that sense of drama and body to it, which I do. The good news is they've got enough crispness and clarity up top to offset that, so they're not a warm or rich sounding headphone specifically, so much as quite a balanced sounding headphone, maybe slightly V-shaped even. And so for classical music, I enjoy them. They've got a good sense of clarity, but also a good sense of body. I'll talk about the HE-R7DX in a moment. That's another headphone that I've got here, and that might be better for those that like a more ethereal sound in their orchestral music. But for me, I like the combination of clarity and body that the Sundara Closed brings. When it comes to more kind of rhythmic music, more dynamic music, and I mean dynamic in the sense that it's kind of got those macro dynamics of bass and drums and rhythms. So I'm talking about rock, blues, funk, some soul, R&B, hip hop, etc. All of those genres, I think the Sundara Closed are quite good because they've got the bass, body and punch. But where it comes a little bit undone for me is that upper end is just a bit too forward. And so what that can mean is it can get a bit splashy, it can get a bit less enjoyable for those more energetic genres. And so they're not bad in that respect, but in some ways I actually think they're more suited to slightly less energetic genres, because they can get just that little bit too forward in some of the genres I just mentioned. Whereas in something like classical, folk, genres where you're less likely to have compression and lots of sound going on all at once, that's where I think the Sundara Closed do a better job. And so just to stress, they're not bad for things like rock and blues and sort of those more rhythmic genres, but I think where they shine is actually more so in things like jazz, folk, classical, etc. But to help put all this into context, let's do a couple of comparisons now. And I'm going to start with the beyerdynamic DT700 Pro X over here. The 700 Pro X comes in $100 cheaper than the Sundaras, and they're also a dynamic driver headphone that can't be run balanced, so factor that in if that matters to you. Listening to Lean On Me by Jose James, and thank you to Tommy for putting me onto this album. Listening to Lean On Me, what I heard was that the Sundara Closed had a wonderful sense of sort of smoothness, clarity. The vocal from this track was smooth. The bass had a great sense of punch to it. It just sounded wonderful from the Sundara Closed. Moving over to the DT700 though, and what I heard was that it separated the sounds a bit better. And overall, I felt like it had a slightly more natural presentation through the upper mid-range. On the other hand, the DT700 Pro kind of overdoes the bass a bit on this track. It gets a little bit too full, a little bit too loose potentially, and so I think the Sundara Closed is doing a better job of controlling the bass energy there. As I went back and forth a few times between the two, it was really tough because I liked the control and the bass kind of presence and authority, but not looseness from the Sundara Closed. But then when I went over to the DT700, I was getting more sucked into the vocal quality. I think the vocal quality is excellent from the DT700 Pro X, whereas the Sundara Closed, again, has that slightly unnatural sheen to it. And so it's a tough call between these two. I honestly don't know if I could choose between them. I think for genres, music, and source chains that are already a bit more bassy, maybe a bit warmer, I think that's where probably the Sundara Closed is maybe just a little bit better balanced. But for everything else, I actually do think I prefer the DT700 Pro X. As I said at the start, I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect closed-back headphone. I'm still looking for it. And both of these have trade-offs, as do all closed-backs that I've tried. But for me, if you're looking for a better vocal performance, I think the DT700 Pro X has it. If you're willing to have a bit of excess bass that sometimes gets a little bit loose. Or on the other hand, if you're more about overall tonal accuracy, then I think probably the Sundara Closed is a little bit closer with just that slight sheen of kind of plasticity on those upper registers. And so having not been completely satisfied by either the DT700 Pro X or the Sundara Closed, I decided to reach for the cheaper Drop and HiFiMan collaboration in the HE-R7DX. These are a full $250 cheaper than the Sundara Closed, and so I went in not really expecting them to hold a candle anywhere near the Sundaras. And the moment I picked up the HE-R7DX, I could instantly feel how much cheaper they are. They feel light, they feel a bit flimsy, the clamp force doesn't feel quite right, it's a bit kind of vague in the way it sits on the head. But once I got beyond that and started listening to Serenade No. 6 in D major for orchestra by Mozart, as I started listening to that, I remembered why I like the HE-R7DX so much. They're a lovely sounding headphone, but at the same time, they're again not perfect. Listening back and forth between the two, I found that the Sundara Closed had a lovely sense of naturality on the sound for the orchestra again. It's not super spacious in its delivery of orchestral music, but the overall tonal balance was solid. On the particular recording I was listening to, I would have liked just a little bit more treble bite from them, but that can be so different from one recording to the next when it comes to orchestral music. And then moving over to the HE-R7DX, it did give me a bit more texture because it's got a lighter, kind of more delicate sound to it. But at the same time, it also lost that sense of body in the orchestra. It sounded less natural, less lifelike overall, coming from the R7DX. And so if you do like a more delicate sound, or you just want to save $250 and still get an excellent headphone, then I do think the R7DX is still fantastic, but it did show me why you would spend more on the Sundara Closed, and it actually made me wonder, when you look at the cups on these being very similar in shape, it made me wonder if these were kind of a warm-up for HiFiMan in producing the Sundara Closed. I wondered if they used some of the lessons learned from the acoustics of the HE-R7DX in order to make the Sundara Closed even better. Obviously, we've got a dynamic driver going on in the HE-R7DX versus a planar in the Sundara Closed. But beyond that, I just think the tuning, the general sound characteristics of the Sundara are a step ahead. Unless, as I said before, you like that particularly delicate sound. And so where this was leaving me at this point was I feel like the Sundara Closed was coming across as the best value for money and kind of balance in terms of cost and performance and trade-offs in a closed back at around about this price point. But I did want to do one last check, and that was with the Rode NTH-100. I really enjoy these, I use them a lot as kind of a day-to-day go-to workhorse. And so I quickly grabbed the NTH-100s to make sure they weren't even more of a preference over the Sundara Closed. And what I heard was two very different sounding headphones. The NTH-100 is much smoother and richer sounding overall. And so the Sundara Closed wins hands down if you're looking for detail and clarity. That also translates to a better sense of attack from the Sundara Closed. Whereas the NTH-100 is a headphone you can wear for long extended sessions with no fatigue and no issues. And so in that sense, they're quite different. The NTH-100 is more of a kind of studio style headphone or a streamer and gaming style headphone, particularly with the new NTH-100M. I'll be reviewing the M version shortly. That's got a boom mic attached to it. And so that offers quite a different experience to the Sundara Closed, much like also the DT700 Pro X does. And so that's really what it comes down to, I think. If you're looking for an audiophile, music listening focused headphone that's closed back and under $400, then I do think at the moment Sundara Closed is a fantastic option. It's not perfect, as I said before. It's a closed back and that comes with trade-offs. It does have that slightly kind of artificial and plasticky sound to it sometimes, but it's very, very minor in my opinion. And indeed, if you look at any of the other options I've looked at today, none of them really come close to the Sundara Closed in terms of what it does and how it does it. Having said that, all 4 headphones I've talked about here today are excellent. I keep them all around because they're all very good headphones and have a place within the market, but I do think Sundara Closed are sitting above them all for an overall sense of tonal balance, clarity, bass control, etc. I was just about to wrap up and realised that some of you might ask about the Sivga Oriole in this one, so I quickly stopped the recording to do a quick comparison between these. And the Sivga Oriole is another headphone that's kind of within this suite of excellent closed-back headphones. It's cheaper than the Sundara Closed significantly. I don't have the price in front of me, but it's significantly cheaper. It sits more around the level of the HE-R7DX, so you're going to be spending a lot less money. It's also more compact and portable. But again, I'd say that it hasn't quite got the levels of refinement and quality of sound that the Sundara Closed does. These are a fairly sort of delicate and articulate sounding headphone, which is lovely, but they don't have quite the same sense of body and richness through the mid-range that the Sundara Closed has. And the other key thing that stood out to me was the difference in soundstage size. So the Orioles are a fairly compact soundstage, decent image separation, but they really can't stand up to the space that the Sundara Closed is able to produce. Both the space and also kind of the nuance and kind of richness and body within the mid-range. And so again, just to bring things to a close, what I'd say is that I think the Sundara Closed, at the price they are one of the best options on the market. And I mean that in the context of closed-back headphones only. The moment you go to open-back headphones, everything changes. And that's where I think, unless you need closed-back, I would always recommend people go for open-back headphones. But if you need closed-back, you're looking for a wonderful musical experience, I think the Sundara Closed are a brilliant choice. If you're looking more for kind of a workhorse, combination of video calls, mixing, mastering, editing, watching YouTube videos, etc., then probably I'd look more towards the NTH-100 and or the DT700 Pro X from Beyerdynamic, the NTH-100 being from Rode. But if you're looking for a pure musical listening experience, I think the Sundara Closed are nothing short of fantastic, keeping in mind that all closed backs have trade-offs. And so as always, I hope you found this video useful, helpful, informative, etc. If you have, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button, and consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell if you haven't already. But for now, let me leave it to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.